Hello, it's Kathy here from Chilled Mama. I just thought I'd pop on for a few minutes before I go off and do taxi run to pick up my son from um, his football training this evening. You'll have to excuse me. I completely lost my voice at the weekend, and it came back. Slowly been coming back, and it's today and yesterday. Towards the end of yesterday and today, it's been the strongest. Still a bit. And as lots of you know, I am doing a birthrights advent calendar, which starts tomorrow, because tomorrow's the 1st of December. I hope you've got your chocolate advent calendars up, or whatever ones you do, or your advent candles. I started doing this last year. I noticed that there were some advent calendars that people were posting on like Instagram and things, and I thought it would be really interesting to do one. And I think I'd just been supporting a couple of women about what their rights were, what they could ask for, and that's where I got the idea for it. And I just did it on my phone. I wrote them all down. I had a bit of a brainstorm and I easily wrote them, and then I looked up some quotes and some double checked some things, but it didn't take me very long. And then I did bits, just did a few at a time, and then of course I had them sat there. I didn't put the year on it, so coming around this year I thought I'd show them again. I had a lot of feedback last year from women, but mostly from midwives who thought that it was brilliant and they wanted to put them up in their clinics. So that's why this year I'm inviting people to sign up, and then they get the PDF and the which they can print off if they want, and the JPEG which they can share on social media. I will just share briefly with you why do I care about women's rights in pregnancy, birth, and early parenthood. And of course, it's not just women's rights; it's also babies' rights and the father's rights. But obviously, we know women are central to this. It's the women that carry the babies, and it's the women that are giving birth to the babies, and it's the women's bodies that can be violated. I'll do another one on men another time, perhaps. But how did I get into this? I think I'm a bit of a stroppy woman anyway. I come from a long line of stroppy women, and my mother was absolutely a fully paid up member of the Awkward Squad. For a couple of years, she was actually the chair of AIMS, the Association for Improvement in Maternity Services, back in around 1970, early 70s. I'd been born at home. My next brother down had been born, and I was born at home in the 60s because that's what everybody was. My next brother down was born in Kenya, and my dad had been at both those births. And then my next brother was due. My mum was due in 1972, and they were suddenly saying, "Oh no, Dad's can't be at the birth." And my mum was like, "Well, he's seen the other two. I think he can manage this one." And she had to really fight. And in fact, when they eventually got the agreement of the head of the hospital, and they had to go right up, and when they actually turned up, the matron wouldn't let my dad in. So my dad went off to sort that out, and my mum went off to have, in those days, you had an enema and a shave, and he missed the birth because my mum barely got that done and was pushing the baby, and the midwife was saying, "Don't push." My mum said, "Actually, I'm not pushing, this baby's just getting himself out." And she said, and the midwife said, "Well, you can't, I haven't got my sterile gown on." My mum just thought it was ridiculous. It's quite obvious that this baby didn't really care whether she got her sterile gown on or not. So my mum then got more involved with AIMS, and at that time there was actually the local hospital was closed at weekends, so you couldn't give birth at the weekend. The maternity unit was closed. It closed over Christmas. So if you looked like you were going to have your baby in that time, your labour was speeded up. If it looked like you possibly were going to give birth at, or if you then went into labour, then your labour was slowed down. And it's just bonkers. Just bonkers. So, yeah, my mum got involved with maternity rights back then. And also, one of the things that they campaigned for was that doctors couldn't complete their training without actually seeing a normal birth. Because a lot of doctors were completing their training and they only ever saw the complicated births. And so they didn't know what a normal birth looked like. So they had to see one normal birth. And I'm not sure, so you have obstetricians that can be trained and not actually have much experience of a normal birth at all. So I've got a good pedigree when it comes to being a member of the Awkward Squad and for understanding about women's rights in labour. I also learned from my own experiences. I'm quite a strong woman anyway, and I've never been more patronised than when I was pregnant with my first baby. And you want to be a good mummy. You want to be, I've always been a very good girl, though. I was a very good girl at school, and I achieved and was successful because I listened and did what I was told. And listening and doing what you're told has always been quite valued, particularly in girls. And so I was a very good girl. But I also was, knew my own mind. And I find it really, really frustrating to be treated. Here I was, a professional woman of 27, being treated like a schoolgirl. And having to ask questions and having things assumed about what I would do with my own body. Even going to the tour around the hospital, and because I did want a home birth first time round, but nobody else, only my mum was the only one going, "Way!" And everybody else, the midwife, the doctor, my husband, were all like, "Oh, first baby, I don't think so." So we planned for a domino, which you can still get in some areas, and it stands for, it's not pizza. It's well, I did have a domino. My last baby was a domino because we did have dominoes afterwards. No, this one stands for domiciliary in and out. And what it is that you get your community midwife comes to your house in labour, and then she helps you decide when to go in, and then she goes in with you, and then you get looked after in the community afterwards. So it's a bit of a compromise on home birth. We did have a birth centre near us, and I could have gone there, and I half wished it, but it was on the other side of the border. I wouldn't have had my community midwife. I went, but the hospital I was going to had a home from home room, and now you'd probably consider that a midwife-led unit. We had 2 rooms with a lounge, and we had like a bedroom. This was all before birth pools. We did have a big, huge bath, which was down the corridor. But we went for the tour of this hospital, and the midwife that took us round just pointed at the home from home room and said, "Oh, the home from home room's in there." And I said, "Oh, can we have a look?" Actually having to say, "Can we have a look?" And she said, "Well, yes, I suppose so. I'll have to go and get the key." And seeming very put out, and I'm thinking, well, this is the tour. I said, well, I am planning to give birth in there, so I would like to see it. That's the whole point. I've come. I have been, thank you. Yes. I did, that experience, I was also assaulted a couple of times during, while I was giving birth. And I think, first time was we'd gone in and I'd asked not to be stuck onto a monitor for 20 minutes, which was the standard thing, but she absolutely insisted. And you're in labour, you're not as able to be as assertive when you're in labour. while I was on the monitor, we read through my birth plan, and in my birth plan I said, I do not want, in your birth plan you can be quite specific, and you don't have to be, well, if all goes well. Sometimes you can put if all's going well, but sometimes you can say, I absolutely do not agree to. And I had put, I do not agree to any speeding up of my labour at all. And anyway, she said, I want to give you an examination, see where you are. And she'd been quite dismissive. She'd already told me, you're not in labour. You're not falling apart enough. So I already wasn't being listened to. And I thought, well, I have no intention of falling apart. And I can tell you, I've now had 5 babies and I do not fall apart. I go quiet and I go into myself. Anyway, so she wasn't listening to me. She'd already overruled me on the monitoring. She then said, we'll give you an examination, but I think we're going to be sending you home. She gave me examination and said, oh, well, actually, you're 3 to 4 centimetres. And I think, well, I bet I'm at least 4. You're going 3 to 4 because you didn't think I was that far on. And then I went, ow! And she said, oh, well, I just gave you a sweep just to get things going. And I'm like, but I just asked you not to. And I was so shocked. I had said I do not want anything to speed me up. That includes a sweep, but she still gave me a sweep. So I felt very violated by her. And I was too shocked to talk, actually, about it and confront her about it. And anyway, so the labour went on, but she went off and did other things. But every time she came in, if I was in the middle of contraction, she wouldn't say anything. She'd just come up and put her hand on my belly to measure the contraction. As soon as she did that, my contraction would stop. Ba-dump. So anyway, you can imagine that we were ready to... my husband and I had a discussion and decided that we were going to ask for a different midwife. And she then said that she was going off duty. Hooray. But I had the next midwife came, who was really, really lovely. But even her, when I was pushing I was on my knees, leaning over the end of the bed. I think I was on hands and knees. I was pushing, and I felt the need to be up on my knees. And she physically got her hands and pushed my back and pushed me back down and said, "Oh no, you're doing fine there." But actually, I actually stopped having and feeling contractions, and I was actually pushing my baby without having any contractions because I had been pushed back down. It wasn't the position I needed to be in. I knew I needed to be upright. So I knew I wasn't going to have another hospital birth. It wasn't an awful experience. But the things about it, I knew I had more autonomy. As I just saw, Ruth said, you have more autonomy in your own home. It's much easier to assert your autonomy. And I went on to have 4 more lovely births, all at home, and all under my decision-making. I did, with my last one, make a request. I didn't even see the community midwife. I'd already helped too many people make complaints about her. She was a tremendous gossip, and I knew that I was not going to have any care with her at all. So I asked immediately. I wrote to the head of midwifery. I've also been quite clear with after the first 2, I haven't had scans. I haven't done blood tests. I haven't felt that they were necessary. They didn't give me any information that would be helpful to me. And that's my own choice, but I knew that I could. And with my last baby, I declined. Being referred to a consultant because I was very old. I was 41, and I was on baby number 5. It's terrible. It put me down as an elderly grand multigravida. I'd had 2 other pregnancies. I'd had 2 miscarriages as well. So this was my 7th pregnancy. Horrifying. But I knew I give birth really well. I don't lose a lot of blood, and I certainly didn't. But I knew that I could make those decisions. There were some other things I'm not going to go into, but I had a very positive experience, and I found that I was never rude. I was never aggressive. In fact, my phrase was, "I'm going to politely decline that." I've looked into it, and I don't want that. You can record that in my notes. I had to say that with a midwife, not my new midwife I was assigned to, but another midwife who came to do a home visit when I was 40 weeks and insisted that she gave me, that she'd make an appointment for me to see a consultant when I was 41 weeks. And I said to her, I've never actually been pregnant this long. My 4th baby, all my babies have come before my due date. I'm amazed I'm still here. There is absolutely no point in making me an appointment. But she was absolutely insistent that she had to make this appointment. And it really upset me because she wasn't listening. She didn't have to make the appointment. I remember another one, my 3rd, having an argument with a midwife about how you work out due dates, and she wouldn't take the due date that I'd counted through the calendar. Anyway, I'm getting myself annoyed. But so you can see, just from my positive experiences, there have been a number of times where I've not been listened to, and where I've needed to actually say, this is what I want, and this is what I'm prepared to accept, or this is what I'm going to ask for. But I have helped well in excess of 100 women as well, many of whom have had very difficult experiences first time round. I then helped them to have more positive experiences last time. So I know that it's fundamental to women being able to be good, to mother like they want to mother by having positive experiences. I also have supported mothers who are not necessarily wanting less treatment but want more treatment, that are having to argue for having a repeat cesarean because that's what's right for them, or trying to get somebody to listen when they're saying they're worried about their baby. So I think it all boils down to that it seems sometimes to be forgotten that this is my baby. Trying to work out, I'm their parent, I'm this baby's parent, and I'm trying to get the best thing for them. It's not the hospital's baby. And yes, there are some things that a doctor or midwife might not agree with that I just decide to do, but it's me that lives with it. It's and it's so fundamental to giving birth, isn't it? Anyway, my voice is starting to go, and I've got to go off to football to practice to pick up my son. Thank you for tuning in, and thanks for commenting, Sarah and Ruth in particular. I really appreciate that. Do look out from tomorrow. You'll see lots of the birth rights advent calendar statements going out. I've got people across the country and some very prominent midwives and doulas who will be sharing them, and AIMS and birthrights too. So do look out for that. Yes, my son Ben, my youngest, he wants to show himself at the end. And actually he was born just at this very spot here, weren't you?
Yep.
All right. Happy Advent, and I'll tune in again. Take care. Bye.
Bye.